Einstein quotes are more relevant today than they were ever in our history. Have you ever thought of how you can use Einstein quotes to create a more thriving organization, or how you could thrive in an age of disruption? We're joined today with Jason Burnham, founder and CEO of Culture Design. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Dan, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Good. You're welcome. Glad to have you here. And Frank Wander, CEO and founder of PeopleProductive. Hey, Frank.
Hey, glad to be here.
Both of these gentlemen are going to take a quote and answer how they might help you to use it to apply to thriving in an age of disruption. I believe in intuitions and inspirations. I sometimes feel that I'm right. I do not know that I am. Jason, go ahead and take this one.
Yeah, so this is a big problem that companies face in general, especially when they think of innovation. All too often, especially in this country specifically, and I don't want to go down too much of the rabbit hole in terms of the differences in our cultures. But we are in the U.S. we are very focused on ideation and pushing ideas out into market, and then trying to validate while we're in market. When in actuality, we don't really know if these ideas are going to work. And sometimes we're pushing innovations out into the marketplace that could have some real unintended consequences, as we've seen in just, whether it's our social media platforms, whether it's our news and information platforms, we're very quick to think that we understand what society needs and how we can best create value. But unless you're validating, very quickly you're realizing a lot of those intuitions that you think are going to yield some real positive results could have some very negative results, in that process. And I think you really need to go from ideation to validation into implementation. Even if you have to do stuff in iterations, I think that's okay. But I think to throw caution to the wind and go purely based on gut, not only are you probably going to make a lot of mistakes in that process, but you're also probably going to be leaning a lot, I would say you're falling victim to your own personal biases, right? And the reason why we stand very strongly on co-creation and making sure that you're bringing in a diverse representative group of whatever stakeholder group you're designing for into that strategic process is to help mitigate some of those biases. It's to help, solve for some of those blind spots that we all have in how we view the world and what we think those solutions are. There is something to be said about the wisdom of the crowd, and therefore to harness that wisdom is how you start to overcome and mitigate those biases that show up when we're driving innovation and implementation.
Great point, Jason. Frank, what's your take?
I think it's really important for companies to be vulnerable like that and not to think they know the answer. I've just seen too many times over the years where people have very strong opinions about things and they believe they're right and they go full-fledged ahead with it without really testing it. There are a lot of ways to test hypotheses in marketplaces and see if in fact it's valid. You can build little simple, client-facing websites that don't do much that allow you to test if people even use something and come in and do it. I remember, years ago, one company built an online ordering thing, and basically you could just go in and place an order when it got printed out, and they, then entered it manually in the background before they invested all the money in online ordering end to end to make sure that they were actually going to have a successful business. And a lot of people do think they're right, and people with big egos and power sometimes throw that around and send companies down a road that isn't true. And I think companies have to guard against that. This is all about speed and accuracy. And just because you think you're right doesn't mean you are. I'm glad Einstein, this is an important quote because he understood the difference. Sometimes I feel I'm right, but I don't know I am. And everybody should be vulnerable about what they believe because they may not be right. It's a complicated world. It's a lot of different perceptions, feelings, and thoughts and beliefs out there. And you may be wrong. And the quicker you can validate something before you make the big investment, the better. I'm totally in line with what Jason said.